The South African Federation of Trade Unions has expressed strong opposition to the new two-pot retirement system recently signed by President Cyril Ramaphosa. It allows workers to access a third of their pension contribution before retirement. SAFTU urges that these rules undermine the potential benefits of the reform by limiting workers' access to their funds. Joining us now to discuss SAFTU's stance on the new retirement system is Zwelinzima Vavi, who's the Secretary General of SAFTU. A very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time for us. Before we deal with the opposition that SAFTU currently has with the two-pot retirement system, I just want to go back a bit. At around was it 2020, after the hard lockdown was imposed, there was a push by Labour to say that, listen, more and more people are losing their jobs. But also losing their assets as well, while they do have funds that are sitting somewhere, and those funds are also used, of course, by business, and businesses are allowed to grow their business using some of the funds coming from a pension fund, as an example, depending on where the pension fund administrators want to invest in. Do you think that this is the answer to that? Does it sufficiently answer that particular issue that was raised back in 2020?
No, it doesn't. And that's the point that we are raising. Maybe we are late, but we can only hope that the powers that be, the government, and the other federations that are negotiating the social reforms at NEDLAC will listen to the point that we are raising about the two-pot system. Look, generally, you're right, we came from the point that says there's COVID, 2 million workers have lost their jobs, and a lot of them are being laid off, as often without any pay, often with half pay or even less than a half pay. There has to be greater interventions to address the rising poverty as a result of those job losses and workers being made to work half-time, and therefore half of the wages that they are accustomed to. Mm-hmm. And we seem to be getting that into that direction. And so the two-pot pension system that have been passed into law now was an attempt to respond to that. It's an attempt to say workers mustn't be made to suffer and to die of hunger and their children of malnutrition, whilst they have money put somewhere for their retirements, which they cannot touch. The rules that they have now introduced just undermine the entire logic of why there was a need for that in the first place. In that, as you know, the two-pot system means that there will be a savings account, a third of your contribution to the pension or retirement fund, which you can access and during the times of difficulties. The first problem is that it is kept at 30%, at 30,000. Yeah. At 30,000 rand. You cannot access it if it is more than 30,000 rand. That's the first problem. A lot of workers complain right there to say, but who can build a house before his retirement with 30,000? What can 30,000 do when you are facing financial crisis? You have SARS on your neck, you have machonisas and other debt collectors on your neck, you have children that must go to the university, and you have just lost your job. Or not, before I come to the losing of your job, you're facing that crisis. 30,000 is absolutely nothing in that context. That's the first point. The second point is that the rule that says you cannot touch your two-thirds retirement portion until you reach your retirement age at 60 or 55 others or 65 others, depending on your pension fund rules or retirement funds rules. But that means that if you lose your job now, you are 30 years, you are 40 years, you are 45 years, you must live a life of utter poverty and hobo. You will become a hobo whilst you are waiting for your pension to save you at the age of 55, because that 30,000 would have been exhausted immediately with other big challenges you have. And the rule that says you cannot withdraw under no circumstances, even when you have lost your job and there's no prospect of you getting a job, is just so unfair, because it ignores the structural nature of the South African economy. The last time I checked, 60% of the young people who have not, who are not in employment, education, and training have not worked for 5 years. Takes more than 5 years in South Africa for one to get a job prospect. 5 years means that if you lost your job at 30, you're going to have to wait until you're 35, 40, if you are very lucky. Yep. With the emphasis, I know that emphasis is now being changed, of saying we're only employing people who are below the age of 25. But with the emphasis of more like going not hard on getting the young people at 30, 35 to be employed, it means that if those people happen to lose their jobs, they will have to wait until they retire. Now that changes the game altogether, because it says that you can almost be reduced into a hobo, as I just said, whilst we are waiting for your retirement age.
What would SAFTU say the ideal amount then is? What's the ideal system that you think would work? Because for me, also with the example that you've just given now, is considering that the majority of workers in the country are black, but they're also part of a cohort within the country that hasn't yet created wealth, that are struggling to create wealth. So what is the answer that SAFTU is putting on the table? What's the proposal?
Well, we shouldn't allow people to starve to death whilst they are waiting for their retirement age. It's just unfair. If somebody have lost his job, if somebody has no prospect whatsoever of getting another job in 5, 10 years, why allow them to starve to death whilst they are waiting for the retirement age? That's the first change we want to see. Secondly, the capping of 30,000 rand is just too low. Of course, it depends on what you have in the kitty, but it is arbitral. This 30,000 is too arbitral. In our view, is not informed by any economies of scale. Some people earn much more, and therefore 30,000 will be sweet nothing, and some people are earning very low wages, and therefore 30,000 may be something very big in their context. We shouldn't have a rule.
But they would have had to accumulate that 30,000.
Beg your pardon?
I'm saying that they would have had to accumulate that 30,000.
Exactly. Yeah. Of course, you can't get money that you don't have. You know, that's our two main problem with this two-pot system. To be fair, it's not going to be offering any relief to workers. I think it calls for the NEDLAC to review the whole process, go back to the drawing board, and to acknowledge that it's not what we thought we were trying to achieve by calling for this reform in 2021, 2022, when we got hit by COVID.
Are there any international comparables that we can look at and say that perhaps maybe this is a system that South Africa should be following, considering once again that we are a highly unequal country, and on top of that, of course, we have this big issue of unemployment that continues to grow, and the burden that places on people who are actually working to take care of family members who are not?
We will have to study on that, Eldrin. There's nothing that I can bring out of my memory now that says look at country A or B or C. But look, in South Africa, we're facing certain phenomena. The first phenomenon is that generally wages are kept very low. And wages have been suppressed in South Africa since 1989, 1990, meaning that the share of wages in the GDP has been going down, meaning that about up to 70% of workers are earning below, I think it's 5,700 rands a month. That's a very low wage economy. You know, I was looking at the political support of the three main black parties, and I saw that their main support base comes from the workers who are earning below 2,000 rands, despite the fact that there's initial minimum wage at 4,200 rands. So you have your first problem is that we're living in poverty whilst we are working. The second crisis is that we have a massive unemployment phenomenon, a catastrophe where 42% of workers are not working. 42%. That's about 13 million people do not get impacted by even the discussion we're talking about here. That's the second biggest crisis. And the third crisis is that we are told that only between 6 and 7% of South Africans in general will have a comfortable pension life when they go into pension. Only 6 to 7%. So even this does not resolve that issue, because all the three issues must be resolved. Of course, we don't want workers to willy-nilly just take that 30,000 or demand to get all of their pensions now so that they have absolutely nothing during their pension life. We want to discourage that from happening, but at the same time, address the structural nature of the crisis in South Africa: low wages, high unemployment, and just too many people that will not have a comfortable life during their pension life. So those are three linked problems that we think must be opened up for discussion again.
Yeah, and on top of that, the value of that salary and what you can buy with that rand is also dwindling. I quickly want to go on to AGOA. The AGOA forum is starting off today. We have a delegation that has gone to the United States in Washington, D.C. Labour, I understand, is also represented. Not too sure if SAFTU has sent any delegation down there. But what is it that SAFTU expects? What do you think the outcomes of this forum should be to the benefit of South Africa, of course?
Well, the first thing we have to say again is to categorically condemn the Parliament of the United States for voting to review the relationship between South Africa and the United States. Clearly in response to the fact that South Africa have taken the case of Palestine to the International Court of Justice, and that the Court of Justice have made an interim ruling that backs the claim South Africa is making that Israel government is conducting a genocide in Palestine. And now you can't claim to be a country that must lead a battle for human rights all over the world whilst you're supporting genocide against other nations by the friends and that you're providing weapons of war to. So we condemn that the American government is using its economic muscle to discipline South Africa, and in the process to send out a message to all that will be supporters of Palestine and who agree that there is a genocide unfolding there, and from raising their voices and from joining the court case South Africa have tabled in there. We are encouraged, by the way, by the fact that the court now have said the Israeli is illegally occupying the land of Palestinians. Now, you can't say when those discussions can be won in the International Court of Justice must be solved through the economic power you have by disciplining South Africa from taking up those issues. Okay. And we support the delegation that have gone there to make a plea to the Senate to say, please don't do this. And because you will be acting against what you're supposed to be trying to do in the world, a policeman for human rights. You are not a policeman for human rights when you look on the other side, when your friends are conducting a genocide and ethnic cleansing against another nation.
That is Zwelinzima Vavi, who is the Secretary General of SAFTU. Really appreciate your time. Still to